and left the strike hanging. Oh, well, you ain't closed it. Yeah. Okay, cut that sucker off there. There she went. And I heard it quit.
Mm-hmm.
You should build a glass cabinet and put this in.
Well, here's the thing. Wherever that guitar ends up, I really would like for it to be played in church.
Yeah.
Or the main thing is the story behind that guitar. In 1949, it's a 48 Gibson ES-125. It was brand new. It was in Arthur Smith Music showroom window.
Oh, really?
And it was on a easel stand. And Daddy seen it. And he asked the man how much, I think it was $199.95 or $101 or something like that.
It's cheap.
With the tax and everything. So he bought it. And they had a brown case, and he wore that brown case out, and then he bought that black one. That's the second case it's ever been in. The original was a Gibson case. Brown,
like a nice
leather
one.
covered and all that, with the same kind of lining as that got. But I think it was a brown line. But he was going to sell his house in Brooksville because he'd been preaching in Dunellen and Inverness, Bushnell, Floral City, all these little towns around Brooksville. He'd been going out and having street meetings. He had street meetings on Saturday night in Brooksville. And so he asked the sheriff, can I plug into your electricity from a record player and all this stuff? And he said, Donald Smith, if you come up here and ask me one more time, can you plug in? I'm not gonna let you. Plug the thing in. Don't come and ask me every time. So he said, I just took it for granted from now on he would be okay. So I plugged it in. And I remember there was a vacant lot across the street from where he set up at the courthouse square. On the northwest corner of this courthouse square, he set up his record player, loudspeaker, and all that. And he's preaching on the street. Well, on the vacant lot over there's where all the crowd would gather up across the street because you could still hear everything good, but they were out of the way of the traffic and all that. But on the side of the building was the furniture store. It was painted a big old sign advertising RCA Victor. And you know what that was. The dog is here up to the old Victrola, the RCA Victor. They call it a Victrola because it had played records with a needle and it had a little horn coming up and then the dog was listening. He said he hears his master's voice.
Wow.
And it was painted on the side of that furniture store, and I'll never forget that. Right? I mean, I can remember it like it was yesterday. And they used to gather up at the courthouse square during election because we didn't have TV. We didn't have, way to get election results.
That's right.
But they would all gather up at the courthouse square and they had a big old chalkboard. And whoever was running for governor and senator and all that, they would, and during the presidential election, they'd have the president and all that.
You had radio, didn't
and
you?
they'd fill in how many votes they'd get on with chalk.
But you had radio, right?
Yeah, but that's how they got their information. But everybody didn't have a radio. We didn't have a radio.
Really?
So he'd been preaching all around part-time and working a job at cutting meat, hauling bread or whatever. And he run the insurance depot for a while. And back then, $50 was a good salary for a working man. $50 was a good salary. They'd make $50 a week cutting meat.
Wow.
Well, he took the insurance job, and he made anywhere from $75 to $125 every week.
Wow.
On the insurance debt. And all it was 10-cent policies and 15-cent, 20-cent, 25-cent policies collected every week.
Yeah.
And he'd go by, get the thing out of the envelope, if they wasn't home, mark them, take the money out of the envelope, mark the card, put it back, and we go on to the next one.
Wow.
And one of the thrills of me going with him on Saturday on the debit, or if I was out of school in the summer, we would go during the week. Well, one of the thrills to go by a place called Bassett Spring. It was an artesian spring, and it was the best water. Boy, that thing was cold and
Wow.
good water. And Daddy would take an envelope. Of course, they had a little thing up there that you close it up and wrap a string around it to keep it shut. That they put on the porch to put their card in for the insurance. Well, he would put a string around that string on that went around the little round
The
thing.
knobs, yeah.
On the flap. He would take and let it open it up like that, squeeze it, and let it down in there, and it lay in that water, and then finally fill up and go like that. Bring it up and drink it. And boy, it was in the old Croom Road. I like that. Go out on the road was patched so much. All it was patches. It was just patches of an old country road going out there, one lane road, and that was something I remember from my childhood. But anyway, in '49, I was 10 years old that summer. I knew God answered prayer. That was the first time I knew God answered prayer. I said, God, do not let me have Miss Stice in the 5th grade. She was wore them medium-sized heels. She meant business.
Oh.
She was a lady of the first order. And if you didn't do right in her class, she'd come up, stick out your hand, and she'd pop you with that ruler.
Oh, no.
And it had a metal edge on it. It didn't feel good. So I said, she ain't popping me with that ruler. I'll pop her. I said, Lord, you better stop this before it happens. So, sure enough, Daddy went full time in ministry. He went to run a revival. Friends of Daddy and Mama was called the Hamlins. They sit around the old oak table, like the one I got in there. That belonged. It's got a leaf in it now, but if you take the leaf out, it's round.
Oh, yeah.
48-inch round. Well, the leaf was out. That's ordinarily until we sit down to eat, we'd put the leaf in. People come over, but they wasn't but like 6 kids in 49, and Mom and Dad. That's 8 people. So we had one leaf in the table that made room for 8 people. Well, anyway, they're sitting around that table, and they said, Dawn, Grace, if you're going into ministry, it ain't always fun and games out there, and it might get hard sometimes, and you don't want to quit and go home if you got this place to go to. You say, well, we got this place to go to. We don't have to put up with this man. So they said, you better sell it. You remember Elisha? When Elijah told him, if you plow in that field with them oxen, you better break them yokes and burn them and slaughter the oxen. Don't have nothing to go back to. I can go back to plowing fields for a living. If this don't work out, no. Elijah told him, said, you going to follow me? If you want a double portion, you got to be with me when I'm taken up. And he come up in a chariot of fire, and he ain't never died, but he'll die during the tribulation on the streets of Jerusalem. He'll be preaching the gospel, and they won't do it. They'll kill him. They'll preach 24/7, and because they ain't never died, they got to be died. They got to die. So they're going to kill them, and then God's going to raise them back to life instantaneous, and they're going to be transported up to heaven. But anyway, Daddy went in summer '49, so that was prayer and God answered. I didn't have Miss Stice. I went to 5 schools in the 5th grade.
Wow. But you didn't have Miss Dice.
I went to 2 schools named William Jennings Bryan. William Jennings Bryan's 5th grade school, a grade school. And when I was in junior high, they built a new school, but they didn't build nothing but a gym. They didn't build a cafeteria. So we had to march at lunchtime down to William Jennings Bryan, where I went to grade school, and eat there. And they made these square, seemed to me like they were like almost 3/4, might have been a 1/2 inch thick. They had fork marks in them, so you know what they were. They were peanut butter squares.
Oh.
Cookies.
Oh
I would trade anything on my plate for one of them cookies. And
Really?
a lot of people didn't like them. So I ended up, sometime my lunch was 5 of them. And some milk.
Nice.
I'd trade
Sounds
out
like
for a couple of milk.
Oh my god.
And I'd wash them down with milk. I love them.
You gotta-
And that lady could make up, Lord have mercy. And they had molasses in them, and they had, brown sugar and all that stuff.
Really?
Cinnamon, all that. But the peanut butter was the main thing. But I'm telling you what, they were good. But anyway, Daddy preacher was a Bible at that building that they had built. They didn't have no congregation. She was a preacher. Miss Hamlin was a preacher. Well, her husband was an excellent carpenter. So she said, well, how about us building a church on that corner, and then we'll find some way to fill it up. And I can pastor it after it gets full. So Mom and Daddy sold that place. They rented a house between Tampa and Plant City, and we lived out there, and we drove back and forth to the meeting. Supposed to be 2-week revival to see what God will do. Let's see what God will do. I tell you, I don't think you even got to be called to preach. I think if you want to see people get saved and get right with God and get their life straightened out, if that's your heart, God will honor that, and He'll save them people. All they done was play 3 chords and move the capo for a different key. And Miriam played the piano. She was, I was 10, so she was 14.
Wow.
And she played the piano, and Daddy played the guitar. And then it went for 10 weeks. And Daddy go out around the neighborhood with a loudspeaker and playing them old records he had. I Saw the Light by Hank Williams.
Yeah.
and Chuck Wagon Gang. He had a 78 of the Chuck Wagon Gang. So 78 back in them days. And all you had, and they're about that thick. And it had one side, some of them.
Oh.
So the later ones had 2 sides.
Wow.
They learned how to
Fancy.
do both sides. Anyway, he'd go out through the neighborhood. Well, old brother Gillette, Mr. Gillette at the time, he was 70 years old. He lived in the old White House on the corner, about catty corner from the church building. Well, Daddy'd go right by his house, and he said, I'm tired of that preacher's bugle. I'm tired of that bugle. Playing that gospel music and preaching at me, inviting me to revival meeting. Now, my mama was a good Christian, but I ain't going to no revival meeting. I don't want nothing to do with that. So he said, I'm going to drown that preacher's bugle. On Saturday, he got his check on Friday. Social Security check. I think it was like probably $90, $70, something like that per month. Anyway, back in them days, it wasn't much. So
Still ain't much.
he went to every joint that he used to drink liquor or beer or whatever. He went to the first joint and drank the next place. He drank, trying to get drunk, drown that preacher's bugle. Well, he ended up being the only granddaddy I ever knew, because he couldn't get drunk. Spent his whole month's check on drinking
Trying to get drunk.
and could not get drunk, and it was almost dark. And he walked all this distance, and because he had no car, didn't have no driving license because he was drunk. So he went and fell on the porch, and he told his friend, he said, you better pray for me. I'm dying. He was so sick he thought he was going to die. But he couldn't get drunk. He was sober. And he knew it was just everything he was doing. He was in his right mind.
Yeah.
And so he told his friend, I can't remember his friend's name, he said, you better pray for me. He said, I'm dying. And so his friend, he told this in church, he testified. He said, he told me, you better pray for your damn self. I don't know how to pray. And so old man Gillette said, well, I don't either, but I'm going to give it a try. My mama used to pray. So I'm going to see. He said, dear God, if you're up there, if you let me live till in the morning, I'll go to that little church and I'll give my heart to you and I'll live for you the rest of my life. And I will never forget the sound we had already started singing. And I heard that chains on them 2 24-inch doors open like that. And one of them had a pull chain on it, but it wasn't latched. It was just, they had kind of pulled it and left it about that far open. But the other one was all the way almost open. And so it'd file in, the door would go back and forth with people going by, bumping it. Well, and the knob would hit the wall and he'd come back. But anyway, I remember that door fat. And I remember that chain on that door rattling when that opened. I need help. I need God. And boy, Dad stopped everything. Here's a customer right here.
Oh, my
And so he said, if you're a born again child of God and you're right with God, I want you to come down to this altar and pray for me. I need to get saved. I need to get right with God. I go as far as I can go, the way I want to go. I want to go God's way. And he said, but if you're a damn hypocrite, you keep your seat and keep your hands off of me. That's what he said.
Oh my gosh.
And Daddy's going like, that means you didn't know cussing in church, But he wasn't saved.
Yeah.
But he went down to that altar, and when he stayed there about 10, 15 minutes, and he got saved. He got baptized in the Holy Spirit.
Wow.
Immediately got up speaking in a language he never learned. And he laughed like a hyena, went for 15 minutes probably from one side of that about 30-foot wide building. He went from one side to the other, just laughing and slapping his hand and doing like that.
That holy laugh?
he said, well, what's your name, bud? He said, Smith, Donald Smith. He said, well, Brother Smith, see if you can find a chord on that guitar that I get in. Can you think it? Dad said, I'll find you. If you can sing it, I can play it. So Miriam, she found him on the pen. And he said, it's a song my mama taught me when I was a kid. Well, I do feel good and I don't feel bad. Got the best feeling that I ever had. I'm so glad I found it. This lovely Canaan land I'm living in. I'm so glad I found it. And he went to laughing again. Daddy said, sing that thing again, brother. Said, I found you now. So they played and sang. He sang with them playing. Oh, I feel good and I don't feel bad. Got the best feeling that I've ever had. I'm so glad I found it. This lovely Canaan land I'm living in. He said, Brother Smith, I used to wasn't in it, but I'm in it now. And he was the only Granddaddy ever knew. He'd come over with us kids and play with us kids.
Really?
Daddy had built a house to sell, to make money, with some of the money from the place he sold. Well, it was on Blackberry Avenue, so it ain't there. They bulldozed it, built a whole lot of other mess there now. But he built that house. Well, we went across the street and got some chicken manure to fertilize the yard. We didn't know all them chickens had fleas.
What?
And we put that
Chickens
fertilizer,
have
fleas. So we put the fertilizer in the yard. Guess what? We had more fleas than we had fertilizer. Some fleas than we had grass.
That sounds like a nightmare.
Brother Gillette would come over and he'd chew bubble gum, and he'd give us kids bubble gum and everything. And so he'd chew that bubble gum and then he'd throw it out in the yard, and them fleas would cover it. They liked anything sweet.
What?
He said, Brother Smith, we get enough bubble gum, we can kill all them fleas. At least we capture them. And he'd pull that bubble gum, he'd say, he couldn't blow a bubble, but he'd stretch it. Way out, like, and you hear Mom and Daddy coming, he said, like he hadn't done nothing. Those kids, look, we hung out there, we couldn't get it back up. Daddy said, I know what y'all been doing, y'all been stretching that gum.
I didn't know you didn't have grandparents.
Well, my grandmother on Mama's side was still alive when I was born. She said, that kid's not going to make it. He ain't going to make it.
You?
And the nurse said, I'm worried about it. Because I was a blue baby. I had the cord wrapped around my neck and it was choking me to death. Couldn't get no oxygen. Well, you don't need it when you're in the womb, but when you come out, you do. I remember the day that your grandmother, she come out there and slid down in a heap in the hallway. Just up against the floor, the door, the wall, and just slid down the floor and said, that baby's tore all to me.
Grandmother.
But you had a bowel movement just as you were trying to come out, and that's what eased and slicked the way for you to come out. And so they were fixing, they were trying to pull you out and they couldn't get you out.
Wow.
But that bowel movement you had as you were being born, you
me
started
out.
right away, boy. You're full of
Ew,
it.
that's gross. I wasn't full of it anymore.
I'm just telling you, that's slicked the way for you to come out.
Same
And I
as-
went in there when she said they tore you all to pieces. I was heading in there. I was going to see who done what. I meant business. I busted in there. No jacket, no coat, no mask or nothing. And about that time you went, "Wah!" I said, oh, she's okay now. She's been going ever since.
That saved my life.
But that's the story behind that guitar.
Okay.
It was used in that revival. And that guitar has seen more people come to Christ than most preachers.
That's an old guitar.
Yeah, well, you saw the back of the neck where Daddy played it. All the finish wore off from here to here.
Wow.
All down to
All
the
of it.
base coat.
Wow.
And it's been knocked over. It's been all these things here.
Does it have
different
Does it
times.
have a name?
Huh?
Does it have a name?
Gibson.
Is that it?
It's got the open G at top. Some of them didn't have the open G. You know it's been monkeyed with. They put the later logo on it. It's not the original.
Right.
But that's got the open G. Like that. There's subtle differences in the different models.
Yeah.
Even of the ES-125, what year and all. Madonna bought a 52 just like it. That's a 48. She bought I think it's a 52 according to the serial number.
Yeah.
I ain't never looked it up, but she sent me the serial number. She said she looked it up and it's 52. So I took her word for it.
Okay.
But it's identical to that one there.
Really?
But I looked it over and I can't see any difference in Daddy's and hers. So evidently they made that same thing.
The same thing.
And one thing kills the value, there's a lot of them. They're everywhere.
You're right.
So it's worth like 35 to 4,000 somewhere in that neighborhood. It tops. It's a beginner's guitar.
And that's not
it's a
much.
student guitar, but it's full size but it has the short throat. Now this one has the long.
The
throat.
long one. Huh.
But
Papa.
if I could donate it to a museum, gospel music museum,
Really?
Hall of Fame or whatever, and have it on a stand, but have the story encased and laminated and on an easel beside it. I wouldn't want the guitar and the story to be separated.
Yeah.
You know.
No.
And it was used in this church in 1952. And they had Gordon Street Assembly in Plant City, and then it was used in Oak Alley. Oh, I took Joe. He was like 4, 5, 6, 7 years old when we lived in Oak Alley,
Yeah.
and he didn't remember all of where everything was at. So when we were down there for Mirror funeral, I took him down there. In fact, Keith drove, and we went in Madonna's old white Suburban.
Oh.
She got one of them short Suburbans.
Yeah.
I guess that's what it's called. Yeah, it's an old model. She
Probably.
don't like the new one. She likes
Really?
that. It's like a